When I got to the law office, the receptionist gave me a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked, typing something as she glanced up. "I'm here for the reading of Robert Gallagher's will," I said. "I'm his daughter." She hesitated. Her fingers paused mid-keystroke. "I don't see you on the list." I tilted my head. "There's a list?" She nodded, clearly uncomfortable. "The family provided names to the estate attorney. Only those listed?" "I'm his daughter," I repeated. "Jenna Gallagher." Another beat. She looked behind her toward the hallway, then lowered her voice. "I'll let Mr. Mendelsohn know you're here. Please have a seat." I didn't sit. I stood in the corner, watching the door, listening to the faint murmur of voices on the other side of the frosted glass. I could already hear Claire's laugh. My older sister always had a way of sounding like she'd already won. Then Evan's voice, deeper now, but still condescending. Then the lawyer's, steady and rehearsed. I hadn't been told when it was happening. Claire texted me last week to say the will was being handled, as if it were a routine errand, like changing a light bulb. I'd followed up twice, no response. When I finally called the firm myself, the receptionist said the appointment was private and family only. So I did what Dad would have done. I showed up anyway. Eventually, the door opened. Mr. Mendelsohn, the family attorney for 20-something years, stood there, gray-suited and unsmiling. "Miss Gallagher," he said, acknowledging me with a nod. "This meeting was not expecting you." "I gathered," I said. He stepped aside. "You're here now." I walked in. Claire, Evan, and Melissa were seated already, spaced like this was a reunion and not a war. Claire blinked when she saw me. Evan's expression hardened. Melissa looked away. No one said hello. I sat in the empty chair at the far end of the table. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Let's begin." The document was standard. Mr. Mendelsohn read from it in a flat voice, occasionally glancing up to clarify legal points. My father left his savings, his house, and 2 vehicles to be divided among his 3 children, which apparently did not include me. There was no mention of my name, no letter, no explanation. Just nothing. Claire leaned back in her chair with that same confident posture she'd always had. Shoulders straight, nails freshly done, like the reading was a mere formality and the outcome already known. Evan looked bored. Melissa nodded when appropriate but kept her eyes low. Mr. Mendelsohn finished and looked around. "That concludes the reading of Mr. Gallagher's will." Silence. Then Claire smiled, wide and performative. "Dad always did love simplicity." "Apparently," I said, my voice lower than I expected. She turned to me. "Jenna, I didn't think you were coming. I wasn't invited." "That's not true," she said quickly. "No one told me when it was." Evan shrugged. "You and Dad weren't exactly close at the end." I laughed, once, sharp. "You mean after I moved in with him for 2 years? After I took him to every doctor's appointment? After I handled the hospice?" Melissa flinched, but said nothing. I stood up slowly, letting the chair legs scrape a little. Everyone turned to look. "Thanks for reading," I said. "I've heard enough." I nodded to Mr. Mendelsohn, who looked vaguely apologetic, but not surprised. As I walked out, Claire called after me. "You don't have to make a scene." I didn't look back. No scene, just remembering. Outside, the air was cool and dry. A little wind picked up, tugging at the sleeve of my coat. I walked to my car, keys in hand, heart thudding. Not from sadness, not anymore. It was something else. A quiet click in my chest. I got in the car, locked the doors, and sat with my palms pressed to the wheel. In my glove compartment was a folder. Yellowed edges, metal clasp. Dad gave it to me 3 days before he died. "Open it when it matters," he said. I hadn't yet. But now it mattered. "My name is Jenna Gallagher. I'm 39. I work as a property manager for a mid-size rental group in Columbus. I live a quiet life in a quiet apartment above a bakery that opens too early and smells like cinnamon by 6 a.m. I wasn't always close with my dad. Not in the way Claire likes to tell it. She was the firstborn, the golden one. Evan was the prodigy turned problem child. Melissa, the late-in-life surprise no one planned for but everyone adored. I was the one in the middle, the dependable one, the quiet one, the one who didn't ask for much. Dad and I had our stretches of silence, years even. We clashed when I dropped out of my master's program. He hated that I worked for a private property group instead of going into law like he wanted. I used to think that disapproval would last forever. But then came the stroke. I was the only one who didn't hesitate. I drove to the hospital, stayed overnight in the waiting room chair, signed the forms when he couldn't. Claire was in Napa. She sent flowers. Evan said work was intense. Melissa texted once, "Let me know if anything changes." It was me who brought him home. Me who changed his sheets when the aides didn't show. Me who fielded the pharmacy calls, the billing mistakes, the gentle lies he told himself when his legs got worse. He hated being dependent, but he never asked me to leave. Sometimes he wouldn't say thank you. But he'd cut fruit and leave it for me in the fridge. He'd refill my gas tank if he borrowed my car. Small things. His way of trying to return something. When the pandemic hit, I moved in full-time. My lease had ended. The landlord needed the unit. It made sense. I told myself it was temporary. It lasted over 2 years. I missed birthdays, stopped dating. My boss asked once if I ever slept. "You can put him in assisted living," she said gently. I shook my head. He's still himself. That should count for something. What I didn't say was that I didn't trust anyone else to do it right. Claire came by twice, once with a bottle of wine and awkward pity, once with a realtor's card, like she was doing us a favor. "I could help you to downsize," she said, eyes flicking around the living room. I told her we were fine. She didn't come back. Evan showed up when Dad sold one of the rentals. He wanted to discuss investment options. I remember standing in the kitchen, watching him talk like he had a right to anything. Melissa came for Thanksgiving, posted photos of the cranberry sauce she didn't make, and left by dessert. But I stayed. I stayed when Dad stopped sleeping through the night. When he couldn't button his shirts. When the muscle tone in his arms faded, and he asked me quietly not to help him up from the toilet unless he asked. We had hard days, but we also had soft ones. We'd watch old westerns. I'd make him soup. He'd teach me the names of trees outside the kitchen window, and we'd sit in the stillness. Sometimes he'd reach for my hand, not saying anything. And then one day, out of nowhere, he said, "You know I trust you with everything, right?" I nodded, didn't say a word. That was 3 months before he died. The week after, while we were sorting through a drawer of utility bills and paperwork, he pulled out a manila folder and handed it to me. Didn't explain. Just said, "Open it when it matters." It sat untouched on my bookshelf until the day of the will reading, because I didn't think I needed it. Because I believed, despite everything, that being there would be enough. But that table, that silence, that will, it wasn't just an oversight, it was erasure. After I drove home from the reading, I made tea and stood in my kitchen watching the light change through the window. Then I walked to the shelf, pulled down the folder, and brought it to the table. It felt heavier than I remembered. I opened it. Inside were 3 things: a notarized letter, in my father's handwriting, a flash drive, and 3 property deeds, all signed, all with my name on them. The deeds were real. Not copies. Originals. Each one with his name, shaky but legible, in ink so firm I could see where the pen had paused mid-stroke. They were dated, notarized, and filed months before his final hospital stay. Quietly, cleanly. My name written in the grantee space, Jenna Camille Gallagher. I laid them out on the table. 3 properties, 2 duplexes on the east side, 1 single-family unit near the university. All had tenants. All had rent payments I'd been collecting and forwarding to him for the past year and a half. He'd always said I was just helping with management, that he wanted me to learn the ropes. But these said something else. I pulled out the flash drive next, plugged it into my laptop inside a folder labeled 4J, clicked it open. There were PDFs, scanned leases, spreadsheets, scanned ID cards from tenants, and then a video file. I hesitated, then hit play. It was him. Propped up in the recliner, same flannel shirt he always wore, frail but steady-eyed. "Hey Jay," he said. He smiled, small, tired. "If you're watching this, then I'm probably gone. Sorry to spring it this way." He adjusted in his chair, winced. "I didn't put this stuff in the will. Didn't want them fighting over it. Didn't want you caught in the middle." Pause. He coughed once, cleared his throat. "I saw what you did for me, what you gave up. I noticed even when I didn't say it. You stayed. That matters." I leaned in, his voice got quieter. "You know the work. You understand the properties better than anyone. I trust you to take care of them. I trust you not to let them rot." He looked away for a moment, then back. I wanted something to be yours, without permission, without their approval." He lifted one hand in an almost wave. "Don't let them talk you out of it. They had enough chances." The screen froze on his face, then went black. I sat back in my chair and just breathed. He knew. He knew what it would look like. What it would feel like, being erased in public. What they would say, what they'd try to spin. And he didn't fight them head on. He sidestepped the whole thing. I spent the next few hours organizing everything, scanning the deeds, printing copies, making a list of which documents I'd need to show chain of ownership. I called the county recorder's office just to confirm what I already knew. They were all legally filed, all binding, all public record. But I knew my siblings wouldn't check the public record. They assumed if something wasn't in the will, it didn't exist. That's how they were raised. That's how he raised them, for a while, until he saw what it meant to be forgotten. I thought about calling Claire, about just telling her, but I didn't want my voice to be a warning. I wanted my presence to be the message. So I called Mr. Mendelssohn's office. I need 10 minutes, I said, to bring something in. The assistant hesitated. About the will? About the part you didn't read. I scheduled the meeting for Friday afternoon. Same room, same table. That night, I made a folder. Not the manila one Dad gave me, but a new one, clean, sharp, black leatherette cover. Inside, copies of every deed with paper clips and tabs and highlighted passages. The key to the duplex on Elm Street lay beside it. I picked it up, held it in my palm. The tag read, Unit B, replace lock. I smiled. That was Dad, always half-finished, always halfway in, but he trusted me to finish it. He always had, even when he didn't say the words out loud. The key stayed in my pocket. The folder went into my bag. The anger didn't disappear, but it settled, hardened into something sharper, focused. They wanted a will. I had something better. I had intent. I arrived 5 minutes early, not to be dramatic, just prepared. I wore a dark gray sweater, plain black slacks, nothing flashy. The kind of outfit that says, I'm here for business, not your theater. The folder was tucked neatly under my arm. Same black leatherette, same 3 deeds, same notarized letter from Dad. I'd added post-it flags on the signatures, just in case someone felt like pretending they couldn't see them. The receptionist looked up when I entered. This time, she didn't bother with the act, she just nodded. They're in the conference room. I walked down the hallway slowly, listening to the faint sounds behind the closed door. Laughter. Claire's voice. Evan's low drawl. Someone stirred a spoon in a cup. They sounded relaxed. It reminded me of when we were kids, how they'd huddle together when something big was happening, leaving me to figure things out alone. But not this time. I opened the door without knocking. Claire looked up, eyes narrowing slightly. Oh, she said, you again. Mr. Mendelssohn, already seated at the head of the table, stood halfway, visibly confused. Ms. Gallagher, I wasn't expecting you. I asked for 10 minutes, I said, and I only need 5. I walked to the opposite end of the table and sat down slowly, placing the folder in front of me. Claire's brows lifted. Evan leaned back in his chair with that smirk he always wore when he thought someone else was about to embarrass themselves. Melissa didn't look at me. She never did. I opened the folder, removed the deeds, and laid them out, one by one, each with my name printed across the top, not copies of someone else's share. Not claims, ownership, real. I didn't say anything. I let the paper speak first. Evan was the first to break the silence. What is this? Property deeds, I said calmly. Transferred from Dad to me. Claire let out a small laugh. You can't just show up with documents and expect anyone to take you seriously. I'm not asking you to take me seriously, I said. I'm asking you to read. Mr. Mendelssohn adjusted his glasses and pulled the first deed closer. His eyes moved slowly over the text. Then he pulled the next, and the next. These are official, he said. They were notarized, recorded. Looks like the transfers were filed 4 months before Mr. Gallagher's passing. Are you kidding me? Evan said. 4 months? Fully legal, Mr. Mendelssohn confirmed. Nothing in the will contradicts these. In fact, the will says nothing about the properties. Melissa finally spoke. He said he hadn't figured out what to do with them yet. No, I replied, my voice steady. He just didn't want to explain it to you. Claire leaned forward, voice sharp. You really think this is fair, after everything? Yes, I said. I think finally it is. Mr. Mendelssohn picked up the handwritten letter I'd placed on top of the stack. He skimmed it, lips moving slightly as he read. Then he looked up. He wrote this? Yes, I said. He states clearly that these properties were transferred to you in recognition of your help managing them, and in gratitude for your care. His exact words, Jenna is the only one who showed up when it mattered. The words dropped into the room like stone into still water. Claire's face tightened. Evan's jaw moved, like he was grinding his teeth behind the silence. Melissa looked down at the table. It's not about gratitude, Claire snapped. It's about what's right. We're his children, too. Children, I echoed. That's what you remember being. I was the caretaker, the nurse, the accountant, the house manager. You showed up for birthdays. I stayed for the decline. You didn't do it for free, Evan said. You were living there. He paid your bills. I turned to him. You're right. He covered groceries and let me stay rent-free. In exchange, I gave him my life for 2 years. You want a spreadsheet? Evan flinched. Claire's voice dropped. He should have told us. He didn't owe you that, I said. You all made it clear what you wanted from him. You never asked what he needed. Mr. Mendelssohn cleared his throat. There's no legal dispute here. These deeds are valid. Unless you can prove he was coerced or not of sound mind, which from these documents and the timeline seems unlikely, you don't have a case. Are you trying to provoke us? Claire asked. I shook my head. No, I'm here so there's no confusion. I stood, gathering the documents, sliding them carefully back into the folder. You can have the rest. The will, the car, the guest list for the funeral. But these buildings, this responsibility, he gave that to me. I turned to Mr. Mendelsohn. Thank you for your time. As I walked toward the door, I heard Claire whisper something under her breath. Maybe selfish, maybe calculated. I didn't care. I paused at the threshold, looked back once. You all treated me like the outsider, like someone playing family on borrowed time. But he knew better. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the Elm Street key. I turned it over once in my palm and said, he gave me the keys. I don't need the door anymore. Then I walked out. The hallway was silent. The receptionist looked up as I passed. I nodded. She didn't smile, but she nodded back. Outside, the wind picked up. I tightened my coat, held the folder against my side, and walked to the car. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wait for a call. I just sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, watching the clouds roll overhead, remembering the look in Dad's eyes when he said, "Open it when it matters." It mattered now, and I was done asking for permission. I started with Elm Street, because that's where Dad always started. It was the first duplex he ever bought, back when interest rates were unforgiving, and he had to fight tooth and nail for a bank to take him seriously. He told me once that the guy at the bank said, "You look more like a tenant than an owner." He bought it anyway. I parked across the street and sat in my car for a few minutes before getting out. It didn't look like much from the outside. Peeling trim, a slumped awning over the porch, but it stood. Always had. I slipped the old key into the deadbolt of Unit B, turned, and paused. The lock stuck a little, like it remembered someone else's hand better. I gave it a gentle push and walked in. Empty. Just the smell of drywall and floor polish. No furniture, no echoes, just clean quiet. The previous tenant had moved out the week before Dad passed, and he hadn't gotten around to listing it again. I made a mental note to change that. The first thing I did was toss the old key in a paper bag, then unpack the new locks I brought from the hardware store. It was cheap, simple work, but it felt symbolic. Every screw I tightened, every click of metal on metal, it all reminded me that I was finally, indisputably, in control. No more asking. No more explaining. Back in Dad's old office at the main house, he'd kept a shoebox labeled, "Repairs and Rent Active Units." Inside, labeled keys, scribbled notes, receipts, even sticky notes with things like, "Tenant's dog is named Rufus. Don't slam the door, he's scared of it." He wasn't warm with words, but this was his language. He trusted me to read it. The second property was on East 47th, a brick duplex with a crabapple tree out front and a rusted mailbox that leaned left. The tenant in Unit A was a retired teacher who paid in checks, always on time, always with a thank you note. I went to meet her the following week. She looked me up and down before opening them fully. "You're his girl," she said. "I am," I replied. She nodded. "You don't look like you'd own a place like this." I get that a lot. She invited me in, told me the boiler had been acting up, but she didn't want to bother an old man in his condition. I told her I'd send someone the next morning. "You work fast," she said. "No point in waiting." I told her. She smiled, and for a second I felt something settle in my chest. Not comfort exactly, something closer to alignment. The third property, Spruce Street, was in rougher shape. A sagging gutter, flaking paint, a side fence barely hanging on. But the structure was sound, the bones were there. It was mine now, and I decided I'd fix it room by room. I did the painting myself on weekends. Stripped floors, replaced doorknobs, quiet work. I'd set up a little Bluetooth speaker, listen to Dad's old Johnny Cash playlist, and work until my arms ached. I didn't tell anyone, not Claire, not Evan, not Melissa. I didn't post about it. Didn't send updates, didn't defend what I was doing. They'd made it clear where they stood. A few weeks after the reading, Melissa sent a text. "Hope you're okay. Let me know if you want to talk." I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. Not because I hated her, because there was nothing left to say. They'd built a version of me in their heads, a version that was always just slightly in the way, slightly dramatic, slightly less deserving. I didn't need to tear that version down. I just needed to stop living in it. So I let them have the family group chat. The curated grief. The holiday plans. I had deeds. Legal, binding, deliberate. Not out of pity, out of recognition. One night I sat in Unit B, new locks installed, walls freshly painted, windows finally sealed, and drank tea from the chipped mug I found in Dad's garage. The one with the faded college logo. The crack down the handle was worse now, but it held. It always held. I thought about everything he didn't say, the apologies he never offered, the thank yous he gave me sideways, through tasks and gestures. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. The next morning I opened a fresh ledger, not digital, a real one, stitched spine, thick paper. I wrote down every tenant's name, every property's condition, every goal for the next 3 months. At the top of the page, I wrote, Dad's legacy is the work, the rest is noise. It's not revenge, what I'm doing. It's maintenance, it's continuation, it's peace. The properties aren't just money, they're his version of affection, his clearest signal, a language only I learned to read. So I'll keep the buildings standing. I'll fix what needs fixing. And every time I walk into one of those units and turn a key, I'll remember. He didn't have to say it, he wrote it down, and he signed it. In ink. Some nights I still hear the rattle of his cough. Still picture him shifting in that recliner, blanket crooked over his knees, eyes steady even when his body wasn't. He didn't leave me a speech. He wasn't sentimental. But the deeds were his version of saying, you mattered. You mattered enough to plan for. That's the part they'll never understand. They thought the will was the whole story. They thought words on paper and a lawyer's voice meant more than what was handed over in private, in trust, in silence. But inheritance isn't just about legality. It's about intention. They got the house, the furniture, the car with the broken glove box latch. They got the eulogies and the slideshow and the polite grief. I got the buildings, the systems, the keys. I used to think love was loud, that it looked like photo albums and birthday toasts and vacations with matching sweatshirts. But love for my father was practical. Sometimes cold, often clumsy, but real. Now, every time I tighten a faucet, answer a maintenance call, or balance the rent ledger at night, I'm answering back in the only way I know how. I got it, Dad. I'll take it from here. The mug stays on the shelf. The chipped one. Still cracked. Still solid. It doesn't need fixing. Some things are most meaningful when they're left exactly as they are.